going, YouTube? Thanks for joining me once again. We're going back into the vaults. I think I'm going to start calling this everlasting series From the Vaults, just so I know. You know what I'm talking about when I talk about the alphabetical collection CD stuff that we're going through. So today, we are getting into some of my favorite bands. Starting off, we're going to be listening to, you know what, it seems a little loud, but I'm going to fucking be a badass. And I'm going to leave it loud. What do you think about that? This is Emptiness with, Not For Music? I don't recall. I think it's called either The No Music or Not For Music. I always get it screwed up. Anyways, started out as a Belgian kind of deathy kind of band, but slowly gotten more eerie and ghostly, kind of cold and inhuman and industrial in a way. And this album is fascinating. So check that out. So we're starting off with one of my favorite bands. I feel like I say that a lot, but I'm my own harshest critic, so sometimes I kind of have to balance what my thoughts are about my content versus what actually reality is, or what have you. I'm rambling already, which is why you watch, isn't it? So Falls of Aurora is the band that is one of my favorites and is next. So this is a reissue of one of their first album, of Hail the Wind and Hewn Oak. You know what? I might turn this. No, don't turn it down. Don't turn it down. I'm not going to turn it down. I need to get louder. So this is Hail the Wind and Hewn Oak. This is a reissue on Bindrune and Nordvis. You would have a really hard time finding an original copy of the original version of this. I want to say it was probably limited to 200, 300 copies or so when it came out. Anyway, stylistically, this might not be the best starting place for someone looking to get into Falls of Aurora. It is a wonderful album, and I'm really happy that it got reissued, but it doesn't have much of the personality that I've come to love of Falls of Aurora. It sounds pretty generic, but good, in a good way. It could be compared to some kind of really dark sort of Finnish black metal. In some ways, it also has some kind of songwriting dynamics and diversity that American black metal was starting to come up with around the early to mid 2000s. This is pretty old, but it's good. It's worth owning. But then it was the next album where Falls of Aurora really started to find their identity. Session drum work by Austin from Panopticon, which I really think lends a lot of strength and delicacy to the music on this one. This is The Light That Dwells in Rotten Wood. Also a reissue, even though it originally came out on Bindrune, but this is a nice updated digipack version of it. The vinyl version also came out, I think, on prosthetic. But this is such a beautiful, beautiful album. This is really where they started to integrate the acoustic guitars, just teeming with melody. And I just really, really, really love how those acoustic melodies interplay and interweave so well with the intense black metal moments. That, I think, is really the signature sound that Falls of Aurora is bringing to the table. When they're intense and metal, it still doesn't sound that far removed from this super musical and melodic acoustic kind of interludes that they weave throughout their songs. It's just such a fascinating interplay between those different elements, and they just do it all so seamlessly and so flawlessly. They are one of the best songwriting groups in all of American black metal, really the world, I would say, in my opinion. And this is really where it just all set off. In fact, back before this came out, these guys sent us a promo of this album, wondering if we wanted to release it. And my friend and I, at the time, we were like, this is too good for us. We can't have any part of this. This is amazing. This deserves to be on a different label that can do more service to this amazing, beautiful record for its time. And we backed off of it. And that seriously was why we couldn't be a part of it. So much respect for that record that we were just like, we will fuck this up. This isn't us. Do it somewhere else. Anyway, so then a couple of years passed, maybe 4 or 5, and I really started chomping at the bit to hear what Falls of Rauros was going to offer. And it was at that time that my friend Austin, who played drums on this one, told me that he had the new album. It was only shared with him at that time, and he said it was the greatest album he'd ever heard of all time, all genres, any bands, everything. And I thought, wow, that's pretty high acclaim, but I'm very curious to hear it. And so I drove up to Minnesota to hang out with him and listen to the record, and it floored me. It absolutely blew my goddamn mind. And I left a couple of days later, and I could not stop thinking about it. And so I probably drove up to Minnesota another 3 or 4 times just to listen to the record and hang out with my friends. But that I started to grow such a strong relationship with this record because of that period of time. In fact, you know what I want to do actually? I want to pull up my review of this. I wrote a lengthy review for this album on my blog back then, and I want to actually read it for this video because I think I did a really good job at reviewing the album. So I don't know, I kind of hate to just like read verbatim on video. It kind of seems counterproductive or whatnot, but you can go and read it and skip this part or whatnot either way, but I'm just going to read this whole review and we'll see how entertaining this actually is. But I'm doing this because this album is such a goddamn masterpiece. Album reviews have pretty much become moot these days. It takes less time to go to YouTube and listen to any album than it does to read a total stranger's thoughts on it. So I try and write reviews only when I feel intensely moved to do so that I can create something that offers my personal insight into the music and how I relate to it, in the hopes that you maybe understand it better after reflecting on my perspective. This album is enthralling among so many other things. Believe in No Coming Shore seems almost incidental to me. Falls of Rauros have come such a long way as a band since their beginnings that when realizing the vast and elaborate scope of their progression and direction, this album seems like a mere checkpoint upon their journey to being one of the most fascinating and memorable bands that have graced my ears. They already are that in my eyes, but the path that they are paving with each release is one that is utterly disregards boundaries, exudes personality, and gently breathes magnificently vivid tapestries that are absolutely unique to Maine's Falls of Rauros. One of the things I can be a bit of is a hedonist. I reluctantly admit that I can be often found basking in something. So it is only fitting that I find myself listening to Falls of Rauros more and more these days, even in anticipation of this album, and especially after the release of the Panopticon Split, which is a must-own release. The music of Falls of Rauros is rich and lush, boldly sweet and vibrant. The album has so much to offer and I can't seem to get enough of it. I seriously, at the time, I could not stop just drooling over this record and listening to it. Anyways, this album is drenched in sweet harmony and so delicately woven with elaborate guitar work. Clinging to every absolute composed section is something I don't see myself getting tired of anytime soon. The slower passages draw me in with sweet harmonies, shimmering guitar work, only to be followed by some of the catchiest, utterly melodic sections I've ever heard, all the while lifted generously by intricate and thoughtful drumming. To me, Falls of Rauros is a guitar-based band. The vocals are secondary, as with most bands of this ilk. If you ignored the themes behind these songs, you'd be doing yourself a great disservice. While I may not grasp the unifying subject of this album, the lyrics are intimate and personal. They seem to intend to serve as a mirror pointed at our very own being and a heartfelt word of encouragement. We are responsible for the world we belong to, all pity withheld. We are answerable for the dusk we have walked through, and our quiet contempt hardly permissible. Last year, I was spending time with my friend Austin, who played session drums on their last full-length, We were listening to this album while driving through the wintry landscapes of Minnesota. I told him that what fascinated me about this band was that they continually wax and wane in intensity in an ever-evolving way. Every part builds up to something else. Every moment of their music is like following the veins of a leaf to the stem, then the branch to the limb to the tree, and the tree to the beautiful forests in Maine. It keeps getting better and better and more luscious and beautiful. I would say that there is no conceivable way they could ever top this album were it not written by the best black metal band in the United States. Though it's all we've got, I've often felt like using words to describe music is pointless. It's like painting basketballs about divorce. I can tell you what an incredible album this is until I am blue in the face, but my words have little ability to accurately portray the power that is in these songs. I have probably listened to this album 25 times since I got it last week, and though I've had so many of the different parts swimming about in my head every second that I haven't been listening to it, it still sounds like the first time I heard it. It is impossible to get sick of this. There is an instrumental section at the end of the song in Spectral Eyes that is an apex. A section so brilliant that it makes everything I've ever done as a music fan seem entirely worthwhile because it brought me to the point of being able to understand, appreciate, and be in awe of what went into what I'm hearing. In comparison to past work, this album in particular is a lot more down to earth as far as the production is concerned. I can't say I've ever heard any other album that sounds like this. The overall timbre of the instruments is in unison, is something that could be called drab and pallid. It all feels very within reach and real, like it's in the room with you. This lends to it being a very intimate and personal sounding record. It also serves to highlight the ornate and lush musicality found on the record by starkly contrasting it. To even further deliver the realness, this album sounds extremely well rehearsed and live. I can imagine they spent much time doing punch-ins or edits. Stylistically speaking, the record is a long progression from a foundation that is black metal. This album is barely black metal by definition. The guitar playing, the bass playing, and drums are all teeming with influences ranging from 70s rock to country, postmodern rock, and moderate amounts of US black metal. Even further removed from this album are other typical elements of your average metal album of today, such as barbarity, anger, or really any dark subject matter in general. Falls of Aurora don't need to bother themselves with any posturing because they can clearly focus on being one thing, and that is great. There's my review. I haven't heard that or read that in years, so hope that illustrated my undying love for Believe in No Coming Shore by Falls of Aurora. So, next, moving on, we have the follow-up of that, and that is Vigilance Perennial, also on Bindrune and Nordvis. And, you know, this is just really a logical progression from the trajectory that the band has seen over the last 3 releases. It's a lot more technical, it's a lot more diverse, and just kind of more honed in on their style and more maybe fully realized, I guess, of their style. I remember when I met with Ray, I've gotten to know him quite a bit throughout the years, the drummer. Before this album came out, he was like, I don't know if you're gonna like it, it's really weird. And I was like, what could possibly be so weird about it? I mean, not that I don't really think of them necessarily as all that weird of a band, but they as a band thought that this album was such a strong movement away from Believe in No Coming Shore that I was actually kind of scared to hear what wound up happening. But it's a perfectly logical progression from the last few albums, and it's fucking brilliant. Also, one of the most incredible live bands I've ever seen. Moving on, we've got Minnesota's False. This is their self-titled album, and yeah, it's their most recent release. They did a 7-inch, but this came out on Gilead Media not too long ago, maybe 2014 or 15. It comes with a poster. I honestly don't listen to this album enough, and some of it has to do with my hearing issue. There's just something about the recording quality. It's a lot of high end. It's really raw and nasty, and it just doesn't sit well with me. They're a brilliant band, and I've seen them live 4 or 5 times, and every time they just fucking floor me. They're fully capable of writing tremendous music, but I don't know, something about this album just doesn't hit the mark for me. I'm not really able to, I think, access the content on it because I can't get past the sonic quality of it going on. It may be like a headphone album that I need to listen to on headphones to really kind of get closer to the sound or whatnot, but it's been just kind of a troubling kind of thing for me, honestly. So I'm looking forward to their new release, and I hope it sounds better than that one. So now for a 180, Fantomas. This is their debut album, and this came out like right on the heels of Mr. Bungle's California, which really had a lot to do with opening my eyes musically. So I ate this up hook, line, and sinker. But I haven't gone back to it in a really, really, really long time. Fantomas are a band that I really respect for taking a lot of risks stylistically, but that's really what those guys do. All those Trace Bruants and Mike Patton taking risks aren't risks to them. They constantly want to push the envelope and kind of bring in all these different influences, make something fun that's exciting and weird. And then they did this Director's Cut album, which I recently actually revisited. And Director's Cut, if you're not familiar, they take a bunch of old TV and movie horror kind of themes, and they cover them. Dave Lombardo was a part of this band, and I think Buzz from Melvins, as well as Trevor Dunn, are in this band. And honestly, I was really impressed with this when it first came out, but I listened to this the other day, and either I didn't remember it the way I thought it was, or I just wasn't in the mood for it or something. But I think this could have been done a lot more eloquently, I want to say. It just kind of sounds like a punk rock band covering these songs. And I think there could have been a lot more maybe instrumental embellishment or different arrangements going on. I'm not familiar with the source material on this really whatsoever. The theme to Rosemary's Baby is something you kind of hear here and there, and Twin Peaks, of course, but you know, it's kind of hard to say like how successful of a interpretation this was. Anyways, moving on, we've got Delirium Cordia. This is the last one I have from them. And this might actually be, of these three, my favorite Fantomas record. It's got a lot more instrumentation going on. Lots of variety and diversity in the songwriting compared to the first one, where this was just kind of like freak out, whack out kind of punk stuff, and then like a lot more calmer, like Ennio Morricone kind of stuff. And this just has a lot more going on. And the artwork on this thing is fucking fantastic too. Ipecac puts all this stuff out. It's Mike Patton's label. There's these just amazing photographs of this like disgusting surgery. Sorry if you're nauseous or queasy, you're gonna have to put the kids in the other room for just a second. But yeah, that might be my favorite Fantomas. They did a couple other ones that I don't really remember what I think of them. They're the kind of band that I don't really go out of my way to buy the releases of unless I find them in a used bin. So there's that. Moving on, where are we at here? Oh man, Marty, you're gonna hate me. So this is Fates Warning, Awaken the Guardian. This is my only Fates Warning album, and I am not very familiar with this. I don't know if it's just that we got a hollering cat here. I don't know if it's just that I've never really. I don't know if it's just that I wasn't in the mood when I bought this for something so kind of traditional and old school. I have my phases where old school kind of stuff from the 80s doesn't really interest me, or traditional metal. I could really take it or leave it, but this is a band I've kind of always meant to figure out how to respect. And this is the only one that I have. I don't know if this is a bad one or a good one considering, but yeah, I've been meaning to get into this. I think I want to say I put this in maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and my attention just wasn't really hooked to this well enough, so I don't know. That's about all I care to say about them, I guess. I'm open to being a fan of Fates Warning. I just I don't really know where to start or yeah. Next we've got Fatal Embrace with Shadow Soul's Garden. Now, I believe I've talked about this on a couple of other videos, but you really need to check this out. This is so underrated. Candlelight put this out maybe 98, 99 or so. And the way this was presented to me made perfect sense, and it still does. This is like a perfect compendium to Eucharist, A Velvet Creation. It's kind of that like riffy, melodic kind of death metal with a lot of Swedish influence. I want to say they're actually from England. Not that it's all that important, but yeah, you could say the poor man's A Velvet Creation, which is a pretty good desirable characteristic, I would say. But the other guys only did one album, and this is great, and it is highly underappreciated. I should probably kick it up a notch since the Falls Aurora review took up a lot of time. Okay, this, I'm going to pull a Justin Stubbs here. I haven't listened to this maybe ever. I don't know much about it. It's a split between Fatal Desolation. Actually, it's a Fatal Desolation full length. These guys are from Asia, maybe China somewhere. Zero Dimensional Records put this out. My buddy gave this to me, and he got it from a trade. Either I've listened to it and it was terrible and I don't remember it, or I've never listened to it. Either way, same difference to you, really. Moving on, we've got Fast Kill. Got the OBI strip put in there. Now, Fast Kill is fucking awesome. These guys are just a fucking blitzkrieg thrash metal band. I've never really heard, maybe, what is that? There's this Brazilian band that fucking brings the riffs. I don't know. Maybe I'll put it in the video, but I can't think of it right now. But these guys are so fucking fast. I guess maybe if you think that thrash metal is kind of boring and slow or sluggish and you need some like real fucking intensity, Fast Kill with Infernal Thrashing Holocaust, this is where it's at. This thing fucking smokes. It's full of riffs. It's super fun. The vocals are really kind of shouty and raspy and really fun. This is just a fucking awesome record. I never really followed up more with this band, but they're from Japan. And if you're a fan of like Japanese hardcore and stuff like that, kind of looking at you, Eric Bauer, Fast Kill really fucking brings it. And lastly, we've got, gonna pull a Justin Stubbs, Father Befouled here. If you're curious at all about Father Befouled and you don't know like what they're like, I highly recommend checking out Justin Stubbs' video where he talks about their whole discography. I kind of default to that instead of, you know, going into detail about their albums. Let's see. Let's start with the earliest one that I have. I'm not super familiar with their stuff. I don't have all their stuff. But this is the first one that I have anyways. Profano ad Regnum. It's okay. It's got a drum machine on it. It shows some early burgeoning style. And then this is their Dark Descent debut. They went from Dark Descent to Relapse, and then I think back to Dark Descent. I don't have the Relapse album, I don't believe. But this is the Revulsion of Seraphic Grace. And this I really think is where they started to find their footing in the style of the incantation kind of worship. I don't know. I feel like anybody says if you sound like 90s death metal or like more guttural death metal or fucking good death metal, everybody says, oh, you sound like Incantation or Autopsy or whatnot. It's this fucking stupid habit that everybody has. There's my buddy Wayne, who I talk about in lots and lots and lots of my videos. And you should all subscribe to Mr. Stubbs there. That is Revulsion of Seraphic Grace, and they have a new one coming out pretty soon. Looking forward to that because Desolate Gods was really, really good. Really like the layout on here. Justin always does a good job on the layout. But yeah, it's they're a band that don't really break free from their own mold, as far as I know. Maybe the new record is going to be I don't know, a big change in style or anything, but they keep doing the same thing over and over and really, really well. I think they have a new drummer. Wayne has retired from the band on good terms. So that's it. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.